The morning sun cast long shadows across the reinforced walls of Fort Meridian, the last known human settlement in what was once the thriving state of Colorado. Commander Marcus Rodriguez stood atop the watchtower, his weathered hands gripping binoculars as he scanned the horizon for any signs of movement. 3 years had passed since the outbreak began, and the undead hordes had consumed nearly everything in their path. Yet here, nestled between two mountain ranges, 500 survivors had managed to carve out a sanctuary from the chaos. The fort itself was a marvel of desperate engineering, built from salvaged materials and reinforced with steel barriers that had been welded together by the settlement's most skilled craftsmen. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the settlement's chief medical officer, emerged from the underground medical facility, her face etched with concern as she approached Marcus with the latest casualty reports. The night patrol had encountered a small group of infected near the eastern perimeter, and while they had successfully eliminated the threat, 2 of their scouts had sustained injuries that required immediate attention. Marcus nodded grimly as he listened to her report, knowing that every injury, no matter how minor, posed a potential risk to their carefully maintained quarantine protocols. Inside the main compound, engineer Jake Thompson was busy inspecting the solar panel array that provided power to their essential systems, while communications specialist Amy Foster monitored radio frequencies for any signs of other survivor groups. The settlement operated like a well-oiled machine, with every resident assigned specific roles and responsibilities that contributed to their collective survival. Children attended makeshift schools in the morning and helped with light duties in the afternoon, while adults rotated between guard duty, food production, maintenance, and scavenging missions. The community had established strict protocols for everything from waste disposal to ammunition rationing, and these rules had kept them alive when countless other settlements had fallen to either zombie attacks or internal conflicts. Marcus descended from the watchtower and made his way to the central command post, where a detailed map of the surrounding area was marked with red zones indicating heavy zombie activity and green zones representing potential resource locations. The settlement's success wasn't just due to their defensive capabilities, but also their innovative approaches to zombie behavior research. Dr. Harper had been studying captured specimens in a secure underground laboratory, trying to understand the infection's progression and identify potential weaknesses that could be exploited. Her research had already yielded valuable insights about zombie movement patterns and their response to various stimuli, information that had proven crucial in developing effective defensive strategies. Meanwhile, Jake had been working on modifications to their vehicles and weapons, creating silent electric motors for stealth missions and developing specialized ammunition that could penetrate zombie skulls more effectively. The settlement's success had also attracted the attention of other survivor groups, some friendly and others decidedly hostile, leading to complex negotiations and occasional conflicts over resources and territory. As Marcus reviewed the day's patrol schedules, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about the recent zombie activity in their area. The infected seemed to be moving with more purpose, gathering in larger groups and displaying coordination that hadn't been observed before. Amy had been picking up strange radio transmissions from the north, coded messages that suggested the presence of a large organized group, though whether they were survivors or something more sinister remained unclear. The settlement's council, consisting of Marcus, Dr. Harper, Jake, Amy, and 3 elected civilian representatives, had been meeting daily to discuss these developments and plan their response. They had worked too hard and sacrificed too much to let their guard down now, especially when rumors persisted of a massive zombie horde moving south through the mountain passes. The afternoon brought news that would test everything they had built, as scout leader David Chin returned from a reconnaissance mission with information that would change the course of their survival story. His report spoke of a coordinated zombie attack on a settlement 50 miles north, but more disturbing were his observations of the infected displaying tactical awareness and the ability to use simple tools. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, casting the fort in an orange glow, Marcus gathered the council for an emergency meeting, knowing that the decisions they made in the coming hours could determine whether Fort Meridian would stand as humanity's last beacon of hope or become another casualty in the ongoing war against the undead. The emergency council meeting convened in the fortified conference room beneath the main compound, where thick concrete walls muffled the sounds of the evening patrol preparing for their shift. Marcus spread David's reconnaissance photos across the metal table, each image more disturbing than the last. The destroyed settlement to the north hadn't fallen to a typical zombie swarm. The evidence suggested coordinated attacks on specific weak points, with the infected somehow knowing to target the power grid first, then the communications array before overwhelming the panicked defenders. Dr. Harper studied the photographs through her magnifying glass, her scientific mind racing to process the implications of what she was seeing. The zombie corpses in the images showed signs of tool use, crude weapons fashioned from debris, and more alarmingly, some appeared to have been wearing pieces of tactical gear stripped from fallen soldiers. Jake leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his graying hair as he contemplated the engineering challenges this new development would present to their defenses. Their current security systems were designed to repel mindless hordes, not thinking adversaries who could potentially identify and exploit weaknesses in their fortifications. Amy's radio equipment crackled to life in the corner of the room, broadcasting fragments of distress calls from settlements they had lost contact with weeks ago. The pattern was becoming clear: communities that had survived for months or even years were suddenly going silent, their final transmissions describing impossible scenarios of zombies working together, setting traps, and even using captured vehicles. David, still dusty from his journey, described his most chilling observation: a group of infected that had appeared to be communicating through a series of guttural sounds and gestures, organizing themselves into formation before attacking a supply convoy. The council members exchanged worried glances as they realized that their fundamental understanding of the enemy had been shattered. These weren't just reanimated corpses driven by hunger. Something had changed in the infection itself, or perhaps a new strain had emerged that retained fragments of human intelligence while amplifying aggressive instincts. Dr. Harper requested immediate access to their captured specimens to begin emergency testing, while Jake started sketching modifications to their perimeter defenses that could counter more sophisticated attack patterns. The settlement's 3 civilian representatives, former teacher Linda Martinez, mechanic Robert Williams, and farmer Patricia Johnson, voiced the concerns of the general population, who had begun to notice the increased tension among the leadership. Marcus made the difficult decision to implement Code Orange protocols, which meant increased guard rotations, mandatory curfews, and the suspension of all non-essential activities outside the main compound. The decision wasn't popular, but the safety of 500 lives took precedence over comfort and convenience. As the meeting progressed, Amy reported intercepting radio chatter that suggested other settlements were experiencing similar phenomena, with some groups claiming to have encountered zombies that could open doors, operate simple machinery, and even set fires as diversionary tactics. The most disturbing revelation came when David produced a damaged video camera he had recovered from the destroyed settlement. The footage, though grainy and incomplete, showed the final moments of the attack with horrifying clarity. The infected moved with purpose and coordination, some serving as lookouts while others breached the defenses, and most unnervingly, they seemed to retreat and regroup when their initial assault failed before launching a more effective second wave. Dr. Harper's hands trembled slightly as she watched the footage, recognizing behavioral patterns that suggested not just intelligence, but learning capability. The implications were staggering. If the infected could adapt and improve their tactics, then every defensive strategy humanity had developed might become obsolete. Marcus ordered the immediate implementation of new security measures, including the installation of additional cameras, the creation of multiple fallback positions within the compound, and the establishment of emergency evacuation protocols that had never been needed before. As the council meeting concluded near midnight, each member left with specific assignments that would consume the next several days. Dr. Harper would accelerate her research into the infection's evolution, Jake would oversee the rapid fortification of their defenses, Amy would attempt to establish contact with other settlements to share intelligence, and David would lead expanded reconnaissance missions to gather more information about the threat they were facing. The civilian representatives were tasked with the delicate job of informing the population about the new security measures without causing panic, though Marcus suspected that word of the enhanced zombie intelligence would spread quickly through the close-knit community. Outside the conference room, the night air carried an unusual stillness that seemed to press against the settlement's walls, and several guards reported feeling as though they were being watched from the darkness beyond their perimeter lights. As Marcus made his final rounds before attempting to get some sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that their sanctuary was no longer the impregnable fortress they had believed it to be, and that somewhere in the surrounding wilderness, an enemy far more dangerous than they had ever imagined was studying their defenses and planning their destruction. Dawn broke with an unsettling quiet that had the morning patrol on edge as they conducted their routine perimeter sweep. Guard Captain Tyler Brooks noticed it first, the complete absence of wildlife sounds that usually accompanied sunrise in the mountain valley. Even the ever-present crows that scavenged near their waste disposal area had vanished overnight, leaving behind an eerie silence that seemed to amplify every footstep and whispered radio communication. Dr. Harper had spent the entire night in her laboratory, running tests on tissue samples from their captive specimens, and her preliminary findings confirmed their worst fears. The infection had indeed evolved, developing new neural pathways that allowed for basic problem-solving and memory retention while maintaining the aggressive hunger that drove the infected to hunt living humans. Her microscopic analysis revealed structural changes in brain tissue that suggested the virus was not just destroying cognitive function but selectively preserving and enhancing certain survival instincts. Jake worked frantically in the engineering bay, welding additional steel plates to vulnerable sections of their perimeter wall while his team installed motion sensors and automated alarm systems at key defensive positions. The modifications were based on his analysis of the attack footage, focusing on reinforcing areas where intelligent zombies might attempt to breach their defenses through coordinated assault. His most concerning discovery was that their current electrical barriers, designed to deter mindless zombies, might actually serve as learning opportunities for more intelligent infected who could observe the effects and potentially find ways to circumvent them. Meanwhile, Amy had established contact with 3 other settlements within a 100-mile radius, and the reports she received painted a grim picture of coordinated attacks that seemed to be increasing in frequency and sophistication across the entire region. The first concrete evidence of their new reality came at midday when Scout Team Alpha, led by veteran tracker Michelle Davis, reported unusual activity near the abandoned mining facility 5 miles east of their position. Through high-powered binoculars, they observed a group of approximately 30 infected individuals who appeared to be systematically searching the facility, with some standing guard while others explored different sections of the complex. The zombies moved with deliberate purpose, checking each building methodically rather than wandering aimlessly as they had in the past. Most disturbing was their apparent ability to communicate, using a combination of gestures and low-frequency vocalizations that seemed to convey specific information about their search progress. Michelle's team maintained their hidden observation post for over 2 hours, documenting behavior that challenged everything they thought they knew about the infected. Dr. Harper's afternoon briefing to the council revealed the scientific basis for what they were witnessing in the field. Her analysis indicated that the virus had undergone a significant mutation, possibly triggered by environmental factors or the natural selection pressure of surviving in a world where humans had become increasingly difficult to hunt. The new strain appeared to preserve portions of the brain's executive function while eliminating empathy, fear, and other emotions that might interfere with predatory behavior. This created infected individuals who retained problem-solving abilities and could learn from experience while being driven by an insatiable hunger for human flesh. The implications were terrifying. These weren't just mindless monsters anymore, but intelligent predators who could potentially develop increasingly sophisticated hunting strategies. As evening approached, the settlement's atmosphere grew increasingly tense as word of the day's discoveries spread through the community despite efforts to maintain information security. Parents kept their children closer, workers glanced nervously at the perimeter walls, and even the most experienced guards found themselves jumping at shadows. Marcus implemented additional security protocols, including the establishment of safe rooms throughout the compound where civilians could take shelter if the main defenses were breached. The evening patrol reported multiple instances of movement in the tree line beyond their perimeter, but when investigated, they found only disturbed vegetation and what appeared to be deliberately arranged stones that might have served as markers or communication signals. The night brought their first direct encounter with the evolved infected when Perimeter Guard Station 3 detected movement approaching from the northwest. Through night vision equipment, Guard Sergeant Kevin Murphy observed a small group of zombies moving in single file, with one individual appearing to scout ahead while others followed at regular intervals. When the lead zombie reached the outer fence, it didn't immediately attack but instead seemed to study the barrier, running its hands along the electrified wire and observing the sparks without showing the typical aggressive response. After several minutes of apparent examination, the group retreated into the darkness, leaving behind clear evidence that they were being systematically observed and evaluated by an enemy that was learning their defenses. Marcus ordered all guard stations to maintain heightened alert status throughout the night, knowing that their sanctuary was no longer hidden from intelligent eyes that were undoubtedly planning their next move. The realization that they were no longer the hunters but had become the hunted sent a chill through the settlement that had nothing to do with the mountain air, and as the hours passed, everyone understood that their survival would now depend on staying one step ahead of an enemy that was rapidly closing the intelligence gap between predator and prey. The attack came at 3:47 a.m., precisely during the shift change when guard alertness was at its lowest point, a timing that could not have been coincidental. The first indication of trouble was the simultaneous failure of 3 perimeter sensors on the eastern wall, followed immediately by the cutting of backup power lines that Jake had installed just days earlier. Guard Captain Tyler Brooks barely had time to sound the general alarm before the first wave of infected emerged from the darkness, moving with military precision in coordinated groups that targeted specific defensive positions. Unlike previous zombie encounters, these attackers didn't charge mindlessly into the electrified barriers but instead used crude tools to short-circuit sections of the fence while others provided covering positions. Dr. Harper, awakened by the blaring sirens, rushed to the command center where she witnessed something that defied everything she thought she understood about the infection: zombies using hand signals to coordinate their assault. Marcus coordinated the defense from the central watchtower, his military training kicking in as he directed guard teams to reinforce threatened sections of the perimeter. The infected had clearly studied their defensive layout, focusing their main assault on the northeastern corner where the wall met the rocky outcropping, the exact location Jake had identified as their most vulnerable point during recent security assessments. What made the attack even more terrifying was the infected's apparent understanding of suppression tactics, with some zombies creating diversions at multiple points along the perimeter while the main force concentrated on breaching their primary target. Amy's radio crackled with reports from guard stations describing zombies that retreated when faced with overwhelming firepower, only to reappear minutes later at different positions, suggesting a level of tactical awareness that transformed them from mindless monsters into cunning adversaries. The settlement's residents had drilled for zombie attacks countless times, but nothing had prepared them for enemies that could adapt their strategy in real time. Families huddled in designated safe rooms while the sound of gunfire echoed through the compound, punctuated by the inhuman shrieks of infected that had been wounded but not killed. Jake's engineering modifications proved their worth as automated defense systems engaged the attackers, but the zombies quickly learned to avoid the motion-triggered weapons, using debris and even the bodies of their fallen to shield their advance. Dr. Harper observed from the medical facility's reinforced windows as infected individuals demonstrated problem-solving skills that should have been impossible, working together to stack materials against the wall and create makeshift ladders for their assault. The most chilling moment came when the infected suddenly ceased their attack and withdrew to the tree line, not in retreat but in apparent response to some form of communication that the defenders couldn't detect. Through night vision scopes, the guards watched in horror as the zombies regrouped and reorganized, with new individuals taking leadership positions and the entire force shifting to target a completely different section of the perimeter. This tactical flexibility demonstrated an intelligence that went beyond simple problem-solving and suggested the presence of command structure among the infected. Marcus realized they were facing an enemy that could learn from failure and adapt their strategy accordingly, making every defensive success potentially temporary as the zombies incorporated new information into their assault plans. The second wave of the attack focused on the main gate, where the infected employed a devastating new tactic that caught the defenders completely off guard. A group of zombies approached the gate carrying burning debris, not as weapons but as tools to create smoke screens that obscured the defenders' vision while other infected used the cover to approach undetected. The coordination required for such a maneuver indicated not just intelligence but the ability to plan complex operations that required multiple groups working toward a common objective. Guard Sergeant Kevin Murphy's team found themselves fighting blind as smoke filled their defensive positions, forcing them to rely on sound and movement to target enemies that seemed to understand the advantage they had gained. As dawn approached, the infected launched their final assault with a level of sophistication that left the defenders struggling to respond effectively. Zombies that had been observing the battle from concealed positions suddenly emerged to attack guard stations from behind, while the main force pressed their advantage at the compromised gate. The settlement's ammunition reserves, carefully rationed for months, were being depleted at an alarming rate as defenders found themselves in sustained firefights with enemies that used cover effectively and seemed to understand the concept of tactical withdrawal. Dr. Harper's medical team worked frantically to treat wounded defenders while she continued to document the unprecedented behavior they were witnessing, knowing that their observations might be crucial for other settlements facing similar threats. The attack finally ended as the morning sun crested the mountains, with the infected withdrawing in organized groups rather than the chaotic retreat typical of previous zombie encounters. The settlement had held, but barely, and the cost had been significant: 7 defenders wounded, ammunition stocks critically low, and multiple sections of their perimeter compromised. Most disturbing was the realization that the attack had been a probing action, designed to test their defenses and identify weaknesses for future exploitation. As Marcus surveyed the damage and began planning repairs, he understood that they had survived the opening move in what would likely be a prolonged siege by an enemy that was learning their capabilities and would return better prepared for the next engagement. The aftermath of the Dawn assault revealed the true scope of their predicament as Jake's damage assessment teams discovered that the infected had systematically targeted their most critical infrastructure during the attack. The water purification system had been deliberately sabotaged with debris thrown into the intake pipes. The backup generator facility showed signs of attempted breach, and most concerning of all, several sections of their communication array had been damaged in ways that suggested the zombies understood the importance of isolating the settlement from outside contact. Dr. Harper's examination of the attack site yielded disturbing evidence that the infected had been conducting reconnaissance for far longer than anyone had suspected, finding carefully arranged observation posts in the surrounding forest that contained crude but effective camouflage and what appeared to be primitive record-keeping materials made from scavenged paper and charcoal markings. Marcus convened an emergency council session in the reinforced bunker beneath the medical facility, the only location they could be certain hadn't been compromised by zombie surveillance. The settlement's ammunition reserves had been reduced to less than 40% of their normal stockpile, and with supply runs now impossible due to the coordinated infected presence in the surrounding area, they faced the prospect of being unable to mount an effective defense against the next attack. Amy's attempts to contact other settlements had yielded increasingly desperate responses, with 3 communities reporting similar coordinated assaults and 2 others having gone completely silent during the night. The pattern suggested a widespread campaign by the evolved infected, possibly coordinated across vast distances through methods that human survivors couldn't yet comprehend or detect. The civilian population was beginning to show signs of panic despite efforts to maintain morale, with several families demanding immediate evacuation while others insisted on fortifying their individual quarters rather than trusting in the collective defense. Linda Martinez reported that the children were having nightmares about zombies that could think and plan, while Patricia Johnson's agricultural teams were refusing to work the outer fields that provided much of their food supply. The social fabric that had held the community together through 3 years of survival was beginning to fray under the psychological pressure of facing an enemy that challenged their fundamental assumptions about the nature of the threat they were fighting. Robert Williams had organized a group of mechanics and craftsmen who were working around the clock to repair damaged equipment, but their efforts were hampered by the need to maintain constant vigilance against potential zombie infiltration. Dr. Harper's continued research into the infection's evolution had yielded a breakthrough that offered both hope and terror in equal measure. Her analysis of tissue samples collected from the attack site revealed that the enhanced intelligence wasn't uniform among all infected individuals, but rather seemed to be concentrated in certain specimens that displayed more advanced neural development. These alpha zombies appeared to be directing the actions of less evolved infected, creating a hierarchical structure that explained the coordinated nature of their attacks. More importantly, her research suggested that the enhanced intelligence came at a cost. The alpha zombies showed signs of accelerated tissue degradation that might limit their operational lifespan, potentially offering a window of vulnerability if the settlement could survive long enough for the leadership caste to deteriorate naturally. The discovery of the alpha zombie hierarchy led to a radical shift in defensive strategy as Marcus and his team realized they were fighting a war rather than simply surviving random attacks. Jake proposed a desperate plan to construct mobile defensive platforms that could be rapidly repositioned to counter the zombies' tactical flexibility, while Amy suggested attempting to jam or disrupt whatever communication methods the infected were using to coordinate their assaults. The plan required stripping materials from non-essential structures and would leave large sections of the settlement temporarily vulnerable, but the alternative was facing the next attack with depleted resources and compromised defenses. Dr. Harper volunteered to lead a dangerous mission to capture one of the alpha zombies for detailed study, believing that understanding their enhanced capabilities might reveal exploitable weaknesses. As the second day after the attack progressed, scout teams reported massive movement in the infected population surrounding their position, with zombies gathering in unprecedented numbers while maintaining organized formations that suggested preparation for a major assault. The infected had apparently learned from their initial probing attack and were massing forces that could potentially overwhelm the settlement's defenses through sheer numbers combined with tactical coordination. Michelle Davis's reconnaissance team observed zombies constructing crude siege equipment from salvaged materials, including what appeared to be battering rams and scaling devices that demonstrated an understanding of medieval warfare principles adapted to their current situation. The evening brought a chilling development when the infected began a psychological warfare campaign, positioning themselves just outside the settlement's perimeter and maintaining constant visibility while making coordinated vocalizations that seemed designed to unnerve the defenders. The zombies didn't attack but instead maintained their threatening presence throughout the night, creating a state of constant tension that prevented the defenders from getting adequate rest while conserving their own energy for the coming assault. Dr. Harper noted that this behavior demonstrated not just tactical intelligence but an understanding of psychological warfare that suggested the alpha zombies retained more human cognitive function than previously believed. As Marcus stood watch from the central tower, observing the sea of infected faces illuminated by their perimeter lights, he realized that they were no longer fighting for survival against a natural disaster but were engaged in a war against an enemy that was rapidly approaching human-level strategic thinking while retaining all the advantages of being already dead. The settlement's 500 residents now faced the terrifying prospect that their sanctuary might become their tomb, besieged by an enemy that could think, plan, and adapt faster than the humans they were hunting. The siege entered its third day with the infected maintaining their psychological pressure campaign while systematically cutting off all escape routes from the settlement. Scout reports confirmed Marcus's worst fears. The zombies had established checkpoints along every mountain pass and valley exit, creating an inescapable net around Fort Meridian that demonstrated strategic planning on a scale that defied comprehension. Dr. Harper's emergency research team had worked through the night analyzing intercepted zombie vocalizations, discovering that the infected were using a complex system of acoustic signals that allowed them to coordinate movements across vast distances without relying on technology that could be jammed or disrupted. The realization that they were facing an enemy with their own communication network sent shockwaves through the leadership council, as it meant the zombies could potentially coordinate with infected populations hundreds of miles away. Jake's engineering teams had completed construction of the mobile defensive platforms, but testing revealed critical flaws in their design when faced with the zombies' adaptive tactics. The infected had observed the construction process from their perimeter positions and had already begun developing countermeasures, using coordinated group movements to overwhelm the platform's limited firing arcs while other zombies attacked from blind spots that the defenders couldn't adequately cover. The failure of their most promising defensive innovation left the settlement's leadership grappling with the reality that they were being systematically outmaneuvered by an enemy that could observe, analyze, and counter their strategies faster than they could implement them. Amy's communication intercepts revealed that other settlements were falling at an accelerating rate, with the infected apparently sharing tactical information across their network to improve their assault techniques. The psychological toll on the civilian population reached a critical threshold when several families attempted to flee the settlement during the night, only to be captured by zombie patrols that had anticipated the escape attempt and positioned themselves along the most likely routes. The screams of the captured civilians echoed across the valley until dawn, serving as a brutal reminder to the remaining residents that the infected were not just intelligent but deliberately cruel in their treatment of prisoners. Linda Martinez reported that nearly half the children were refusing to eat, while Patricia Johnson's agricultural teams had abandoned their posts entirely, leaving the settlement's food production in jeopardy. The social cohesion that had sustained the community through 3 years of survival was disintegrating under pressure that no human settlement had ever been designed to withstand. Dr. Harper's capture mission yielded unexpected results when her team successfully tranquilized one of the alpha zombies, only to discover that the specimen possessed cognitive abilities that approached normal human intelligence while retaining the infection's aggressive hunger. The captured alpha demonstrated problem-solving skills, memory retention, and even rudimentary communication abilities that suggested the virus had not just preserved certain brain functions but had actually enhanced them in specific ways. Most disturbing was the alpha's apparent awareness of its own condition and its ability to express what could only be described as satisfaction when discussing the systematic destruction of human settlements. The interview sessions, conducted through reinforced barriers, revealed that the infected retained enough human memory to understand what they had lost while being driven by an overwhelming compulsion to eliminate all remaining human life. The fourth day brought the beginning of the final assault as the infected launched coordinated attacks on multiple fronts while simultaneously implementing siege tactics designed to starve the settlement into submission. Zombies had constructed crude but effective barriers around the settlement's perimeter, preventing any possibility of resupply or evacuation while maintaining constant pressure on the defenders through rotating attack waves that prevented adequate rest or equipment maintenance. Jake's defensive systems were being systematically dismantled by zombies that had learned to identify and target critical components, while Amy's communication equipment was being jammed by infected individuals who had somehow acquired and learned to operate electronic warfare devices salvaged from military installations. The settlement's ammunition reserves dropped below 20% as the defenders found themselves engaged in continuous firefights with enemies that used cover effectively and seemed to understand the concept of suppressive fire. Marcus made the agonizing decision to implement final protocols, ordering the destruction of sensitive equipment and the preparation of the settlement's self-destruct systems rather than allow their resources and knowledge to fall into zombie hands. Dr. Harper's research data was encrypted and transmitted to the few remaining settlements that still maintained radio contact, ensuring that their discoveries about the infection's evolution would survive even if Fort Meridian fell. The medical facility was converted into a final defensive position where the most vulnerable civilians could make their last stand, while the remaining defenders prepared for what everyone understood would be their final battle. As night fell on the fourth day, the infected massed for what appeared to be their concluding assault, with thousands of zombies gathering in organized formations that stretched beyond the range of the settlement's lights. The alpha zombies had positioned themselves at strategic points around the perimeter, coordinating their forces through the complex acoustic signals that Dr. Harper's team had documented but never fully decoded. Marcus stood in the central command post, surrounded by the remaining members of his leadership team, knowing that they had fought bravely against an enemy that had evolved beyond their ability to counter. The settlement's 500 residents had been reduced to fewer than 300 effective defenders, and their ammunition would last perhaps 2 hours against a sustained assault. Outside the walls, the infected began their final advance, moving with the precision of a military unit while maintaining the relentless hunger that had driven them to systematically eliminate every human settlement in the region. The last beacon of human civilization in the Colorado mountains prepared to make its final stand against an enemy that had proven more adaptable, more intelligent, and more ruthless than anyone had believed possible. The final assault began at midnight with a coordinated barrage that demonstrated the infected had learned to weaponize the settlement's own infrastructure against its defenders. Zombies launched salvaged propane tanks over the walls, creating explosive diversions while other groups used the chaos to breach weakened sections of the perimeter that had been systematically undermined during the siege. Marcus coordinated the desperate defense from multiple positions as the command structure adapted to the reality that traditional military tactics were insufficient against an enemy that could predict and counter conventional strategies in real time. Dr. Harper had made a crucial discovery during her final hours of research. The alpha zombies' enhanced intelligence came with a critical vulnerability that could be exploited if the defenders could maintain their position until dawn. Jake's last-ditch engineering solution involved overloading the settlement's entire electrical grid to create a massive electromagnetic pulse that would disrupt the infected's communication network while simultaneously igniting emergency flares that would signal any remaining aircraft in the region. The plan required manually activating systems throughout the compound while under direct assault, a task that fell to volunteers who understood they were unlikely to survive the mission. Amy had managed to establish contact with a military unit operating from a secure facility 300 miles north, transmitting the settlement's research data and tactical observations about the evolved infected while requesting immediate evacuation support for any survivors. The response confirmed that Fort Meridian's intelligence about the zombie evolution had been crucial in helping other settlements develop effective countermeasures, meaning their sacrifice would not be in vain. The breakthrough came when Dr. Harper's analysis of the captured alpha zombie revealed that the enhanced intelligence was dependent on a specific neurochemical balance that became unstable when exposed to certain electromagnetic frequencies. The infected's communication network, while sophisticated, relied on the same neural pathways that governed their enhanced cognitive abilities, creating a potential cascade failure point if the right frequency could be broadcast at sufficient power. Jake's electromagnetic pulse system was hastily modified to target the specific frequency range that Dr. Harper had identified, transforming their desperate last stand into a calculated strike against the infected's most critical vulnerability. The modification required stripping components from every electronic device in the settlement, including life support systems and communication equipment, betting everything on a single coordinated attack. As the infected forces pressed their assault through the compound's outer defenses, the remaining defenders executed a fighting withdrawal to predetermined positions that would maximize the effectiveness of their electromagnetic weapon while protecting the technical teams needed to operate it. Michelle Davis led a heroic rearguard action that bought precious time for the final preparations, while Tyler Brooks coordinated the evacuation of wounded civilians to the reinforced medical facility that would serve as their final refuge. The infected had adapted to every defensive strategy the settlement had employed, but their reliance on their enhanced communication network had become both their greatest strength and their most exploitable weakness. The electromagnetic pulse activated at 4:17 a.m., sending a targeted frequency burst across the entire valley that instantly disrupted the infected's coordination network and triggered the neurochemical cascade that Dr. Harper had predicted. The effect was immediate and devastating. Alpha zombies collapsed as their enhanced neural pathways overloaded, while the remaining infected reverted to their original mindless state without the guidance of their intelligent leaders. The coordinated assault dissolved into chaos as thousands of zombies lost their tactical awareness and began attacking each other in confusion, their sophisticated siege tactics replaced by the random aggression that had characterized the early days of the outbreak. Jake's flare system illuminated the valley in brilliant light, revealing the scope of their victory as the infected forces scattered in all directions without leadership or coordination. The rescue helicopters arrived at dawn, guided by the emergency signals and Amy's transmitted coordinates, finding a settlement that had been reduced to fewer than 200 survivors but had achieved something unprecedented in the 3 years since the outbreak began. Fort Meridian had not just survived an assault by evolved infected but had discovered and successfully deployed a weapon that could neutralize the intelligence enhancement that made the zombies so dangerous. Dr. Harper's research data, transmitted to military command during the final hours of the siege, provided the foundation for a new defensive strategy that could be implemented at surviving settlements across the continent. The electromagnetic frequency weapon could be replicated using readily available components, offering hope that humanity could regain the tactical advantage in their war against the infected. Marcus stood among the ruins of their settlement as the evacuation proceeded, watching the sunrise illuminate a valley littered with thousands of inactive zombie corpses whose enhanced intelligence had been permanently disabled by their desperate gambit. The cost had been enormous, more than half their population lost, their home destroyed and their resources exhausted, but they had proven that the evolved infected could be defeated through scientific understanding and coordinated resistance. The survivors would be relocated to other settlements where they could share their hard-won knowledge and help prepare humanity's next phase of resistance against the zombie threat. As the helicopters lifted off from the valley floor, carrying the last defenders of Fort Meridian to safety, the settlement's legacy lived on in the tactical intelligence and technological solutions that would help other communities survive the ongoing apocalypse. The story of Fort Meridian became legend among the surviving human settlements, not as a tale of tragic loss but as proof that intelligence, courage and scientific determination could overcome even the most evolved threats. Dr. Harper's research continued at secure military facilities, leading to the development of portable electromagnetic weapons that could disable infected intelligence networks across wide areas. Jake's engineering innovations were replicated and improved, creating new defensive technologies that gave human settlements significant advantages over zombie forces. The settlement's sacrifice had not just saved their own survivors but had provided humanity with the tools needed to begin reclaiming their world from the intelligent dead, transforming the zombie apocalypse from an extinction event into a war that could be won through knowledge, preparation, and the unbreakable human spirit that had sustained Fort Meridian through its darkest hours. 7.